Well, so look, this started on Sunday. David Ornstein, who is always well connected, suggested some new news, which was that Chelsea no longer need to make any sales before the 30th of June of this year. Of course, there's been a lot of speculation as to whether they would need to meet this year's PSR test. He says that his information is that they do not, which obviously begs the question, how they're going to bridge the very substantial gap that they do have in PSR. Because that bit's not really debatable. It's not really debatable that they had a big gap in 22-23. We know, however, that they attempted to bridge the gap in 22-23 by the hotel deal that you mentioned, where they sold for £98 million, two of the hotels, generating a profit in their accounts of £76 million. And they also added on a couple of other payments, some costs and a settlement of about another £30 million. So we know they were a long way short in 22-23 on the trading side. We think the numbers are broadly 150 to 200 million pound of operating loss in the current season. So the question is, how did they bridge that? We know that they, as at the date that they put out their accounts, that they've done about 50 million quid of transfer profit. That will be Mason Mount, probably with a little bit of downward adjustment for Ziyech, who is now gone for free. So which will be slightly below his book value. So we know that they've got this big hole in 23-24. And so I thought it might be interesting just to have a look at what's happening at the land registry in relation to Cobham, because of course, if you go through the assets of Chelsea from the property side, Cobham being a high quality residential area with a very large training ground and training centre for Chelsea, obviously is one of the next assets in line that may have some value. And sure enough, days after we sat down after transfer deadline on the 5th of February, for the first time in 18 years, Chelsea made some applications to the land registry about dealings. And one of them is described on those as intra-group. I think putting two and two together, it would seem to me to suggest that they have done something intra-group in respect of Cobham. Now, Chelsea are denying that that is a sale of the asset or that they are attempting to sell the asset. But clearly, there has been something happening with Cobham in respect of their property assets transferring intra-group. That bit is not in doubt. So,
is there anything wrong? I mean, I'll put this to you as well, Simon. Is there anything wrong in selling buildings to try and balance the books as opposed to players?
Not really. If it's fair market value, not really.
So,
I'm surprised Man City didn't have the foresight. They probably knew what they know now. They'd have loaded Man City into a business that had a whole raft of assets that could have protected them against some of the challenges they've had over the years. And Chelsea are just looking at the opportunity to overcome the obstacles and creating a solution to their problems.
So
whether we like it or not is a different matter.
Whether we like it or not, is it not smart business?
Well, yes, it's using the assets they have in the company. So I don't, in the group, we should say. I don't have any problem with it. I mean, if it's permitted by the rules, it's permitted by the rules. However, there are a couple of wrinkles. The first one is fair market value, as Simon mentioned. And we know, and we've talked about this before, that as at around April, the deal had not been approved by the Premier League in relation to the hotel sale, the £100 million, £98 million hotel sale that's given them the £76 million profit.
And it's still not approved?
Well, we understand they are still Chelsea. And remember, Chelsea don't have any confidentiality in respect of their own dealings of their property. They of course, could confirm if it had been approved by the Premier League and had therefore completed. We understand that Chelsea are not yet confirming that it has been approved. It seems to me, given the passage of time, that would suggest that this situation now has moved into a different phase, that it has formally been rejected on a fair market value by the Premier League, and it is now in some form of arbitration. We would not know about that because there's a confidentiality clause within the Premier League rules, and there are very limited ways in which such a dispute a fair market value dispute can actually go to arbitration within the rules. But I think it's fair to assume either that it is in arbitration or that it's been formally rejected. But if it was formally rejected or remarked at a much lower market value, that would mean that they had failed 22-23. So we would know about it.
Would they have formally failed on the basis of process rather than on valuation? Because isn't there an obligation upon Chelsea to seek the Premier League's permission for such a transaction?
Yeah.
And if they haven't done that, and the Premier League have said, well, in fact, we're not arguing with you about value, we're excluding the conversation because you didn't follow the guidelines that you had to follow in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, though. I think we'd know by now, because I think if they'd have breached the procedural rules and therefore sort of missed their opportunity to get fair market value approval, then the Premier League would have charged them in some form.
But didn't we establish that last time round? I thought we established that in the last conversation that we had. They had a certain amount of time to do that, and clearly by the nature of what they'd done, they hadn't done that.
Well, it doesn't look like they did it, but of course the requirement for the Premier League to approve the valuation is a mutual process. So it may well be that the Premier League themselves were not in a position to get their ducks in a row to agree the fair market value themselves.
It's not difficult, is it? I mean,
it shouldn't be.
I mean, it's going to be a matter of fact, isn't it? A fair market value is going to have a variety of different firms that can value the property at a certain price, and out of it will come a solution, right?
Yeah,
difficult.
Except
for the Premier League or for Chelsea.
And that is what we've discussed before, and we are talking about prime central London real estate. I guess perhaps on this situation, being generous to both parties, that the valuation here is a little bit more subjective in that the property is part of a stadium. Mm-hmm. It's part of a stadium that they're saying they're going to redevelop. The hotel is not a brand new hotel. It's not it's a 4-star sort of mid-market hotel. We're not talking about something that is very clearly an institution and therefore, has that kind of institutional London value. It's
but that's why you have expertise valuing it.
Of course.
There'll be comparable transactions.
Of course. But what I'm saying is that some of those valuation metrics in respect of the hotel may be more subjective than usual, in that perhaps, for example, Chelsea have more control over what happens to the site. Yeah. So there may
be just be an argument over quantum, and there might even be an argument over discounting the entire equation because it didn't comply with the rules.
Correct.
Are we right in thinking now, Stefan, that Chelsea still believe, or certainly as of this moment believe, that there is no need to sell any more players?
Well, David Ornstein is not known for saying things that he hasn't been well informed. So I think, as I understand it, what Chelsea are briefing is that they actually are concerned about 24-25, but they are not concerned about 23-24. I can tell you with certainty that the 23-24 operating numbers are very poor. So the only way that they can bridge the gap is by the sale of either footballers or tangible assets. That is the only way. I mean, people will probably be laughing at this and saying, "Oh, Todd Bowley's got another loophole up his sleeve. He's just about to unveil it."
Yeah.
But I don't think it's likely. I think the likelihood is they are either going to do it by selling players, which looks very difficult for reasons we've discussed many times, or they've got a plan in respect of some of their property assets.
Yeah. Stefan, stay with us because we're delighted you've come in and joined us this morning. I want to get into another few areas in the FFP financial area in general. Stefan Borson with us live.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.